Fairies, goblins, and gremlins. Today we talk with the editor of Grifty Shades of Fey. These gnomes are about to get naughty on Dungeon Crawlers.
This episode of Dungeon Crawlers Radio is brought to you by Geek Girl Realty. Are you looking for that fortress of solitude or a cottage in the woods? Geek Girl Realty can help you out. Check them out at www.geekgirlrealty.com.
Dungeon Crawlers.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers, where we've traveled before jumping forward, eating breakfast, then coming back before dinner so that we can bring you this show, because technology sucks. That's right.
Okay, Dan, I think you're missing the main point here. This is the third time we're trying to record this show, but we're also talking today about a book about the fairy.
We're talking about books, not time travel. That was last week. That's right.
That was last week. Today, we're messing with the fairy folk, and I think the fairy folk are messing with us.
They are. Gremlins, gnomes, and other things mess with technology. So that's exactly what's going on right now.
I'll get the white sage so we can scrub this place.
If only we had a professional who wrote about this kind of stuff that we could talk to today.
I think we do.
Yeah, you guys are in luck.
Yes. So we have Mike Clough on the show today to talk about Grifty Shades of Fey, not to be mistaken for 50 Shades of Grey. So for those of you that have come to the show to hear about that and to listen to Mackenzie laugh like a schoolgirl, this is the wrong show. We're going to talk about Fey.
I was going to say it's the right show for the giggle like a schoolgirl, because I'm sorry, you keep saying that, and all I see are the Akatar Fays in my head right now, so sorry.
You know, I think that's the whole point to having a name like that, Grifty Shades of Fey, to get people to giggle, to get people to pick it up, because, I mean, that's perfect. That's the whole point of marketing and things like that, is to get someone to go, wow, I wonder what's going on in that book.
I think it's just to get us to say the name again and again and again, because how many times have we said it on the show? Grifty Shades of Fey. Like, see, it's like a tongue twister.
It is. So, tell us about the book. I know in our past life, we already talked about this. We already talked about what this book is all about. But let's do it again.
I'm having
we know what it's not. Now let's find out what it is.
Okay, so Grifty Shades of Fey. It started with a bunch of us from FB Press, which is the publishing site of Fiction Vortex. We were sitting around playing around with spoonerisms, which is where you take the first letters of words in a phrase and you mix them around and create a completely new sentence. And we were doing that to different book titles. And I shouted out, Grifty Shades of Fey. And the other people in the room were like, we need to make that into a book. That's awesome. And so we decided that, hey, we will make it an anthology, and we will get awesome authors to write in this anthology, and we'll put it on Kickstarter. And that's where it's at now.
Nice. So, name like a couple of authors that are in this anthology, if you can.
We've got David Farland, Michael Brent Collins, Johnny Worthen, Patty Larson, who writes some cozy mysteries, but she's starting a whole new world, and having the premiere story for that in this anthology, and a bunch of other authors that are coming in there. The cool thing is there's actually submissions open for the open slots, so I've got probably about 25 submissions so far, but I haven't picked anybody yet.
Nice. Hey, I may have a chance. All right. Anyways, so I mean, you've got some really good names here. Dave Farland, or Dave Worthington, for those that know him better as that do. He did the Rune Lords. Michael Brent Collins has been on the show many times. For those that are probably scratching their head saying that sounds familiar, Golden Baby. That's all I need to say. And Johnny Worthen, he's been on the show too. One of my favorite novels of his is The Finger Trap. So you've got a good lineup, and hopefully a few more good stories can jump into this. But, everyone loves Fae in one form or another. So this just sounds like a fantastic book that may have some mischief, some mayhem, maybe a little bit of naughtiness, but not too much.
Yep. Naughty fairies, but not that type of naughty fairies.
Correct. Not that type of naughty fairies. It definitely says that on the Kickstarter, that not inappropriate, more PG-13-ish fairies that we're looking at.
For those of you who keep a dictionary very, very close, Fae is a type of fairy folk. Just,
Not usually with wings, if I remember correctly, but they do have the pointy ears, which I love.
Right? Is that correct? I guess I should ask the professional author on this one.
It's sort of interesting because the term actually means ethereal or otherworldly, but there's also a term that people would use to refer to people that were chronically ill or had issues. You could think changelings and issues like that. So it's not exactly defined to a specific type of fairy folk or anything like that. But yeah, it's I'm trying to use it as an all-encompassing gnomes, pixies, leprechauns, the flying fairy type. But then you have the fair folk who are human-sized and are usually a whole lot meaner than all the rest of them combined. So yeah, all the above.
Interesting.
And I mean, in some realms of fantasy, even fairy elves are considered fae. You got dryads. Yep. So,
my brain melted.
Okay.
There's actually a couple different origins when it comes to the fae or the fair folk. A lot of it comes around from the areas of the Black Forest, and then you've got England and the Celtic traditions, and a lot of it is based on creatures of nature and creation. But then in history, you can see where Christianity came in and started making an influence on the stories that the people would tell. And another origin for the fairy folk is that they are actually fallen angels or those spirits that were kicked out of heaven, and now they cause mischief for everybody else. And that was, propaganda from the church back then to make it so people would stop telling stories about these little creepy creatures or stop, leaving out milk for them and things like that. But I think it backfired.
That's interesting. I had no idea about any of that because I remember like changelings and stuff from like Scottish folklore. Like they would leave, I think it was babies in the forest sometimes because they thought they were changelings to offer them back to the spirits there.
Yeah. Horrible things.
I'm sorry. I'm just thinking if that happened today, like, okay, brothers and sisters, we cannot leave little bowls of milk out for the demons and the devils. Those are demons and devils, guys. They're gonna that's just hilarious. I'm sorry. I hadn't heard that before. Like that's new information to me. I'm learning.
Yeah.
Live.
It makes it interesting when you start looking into how history played into it. But also you look at what popular culture has done with a lot of the fairy folk and they make it so you have like Tinkerbell and it's all about doing good and loving each other. But the original fairy folk were not nice. They didn't do nice things to people most of the time. They would love to come and kick your cow and make it so it produced curdled milk and make it so your other livestock would just fall over dead and just crazy things like that. They weren't very nice if you crossed them, and it didn't take very much to cross them. Or
well, even if they wanted to have fun, right? Like Rip Van Winkle, wasn't he just a normal guy who danced with fairies and then they put him to sleep for 100 years?
Yeah, he got mixed up in a bowling game that the fairies were like, hey, yeah, let's let this guy drink some of our stuff, and it didn't work out very well for him.
So wait, are like imps classified as Faith or
Yep.
folk too?
Yeah.
Depends.
I mean, especially it depends. It depends on. That's the interesting thing is when you look across different cultures in their mythology, there's a lot of commonalities when it comes to the hidden folk and the way that they interact with people. Even go to I think it's in Japan where they have the fox spirits that are mischievous spirits that can turn into women and mess with people and be mischievous and usually ends up in somebody's death. But imps, yeah, I mean those are lesser fairies or it could be lesser demons. It depends on whose side of the story you're playing on.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And even like, a Midsummer Night's Dream. I mean, that's fairies messing with humans as well. So that's one of the really cool things. Fey creatures are almost synonymous in every culture, just like dragons are. Every culture has some sort of Fey story, myth, whatever you want to call it, some sort of mythos, and it's just they're everywhere. And so, whether you're leaving a bowl out of milk out for the Fae to leave you alone and not cause any mischief, or help fix your shoes in the middle of the night, or whatever, it's really interesting how these stories have evolved over the years, the centuries, the decades, and even now, they're I guess fantasized or romanticized in Disney culture to a point where it's just all cutesy and lovable. But you hit it on the head there. In the past, these fairy tales and that were kind of mean and evil and dark. They weren't.
Well, they were warnings.
Yeah, they were warnings. They weren't pleasant. You told your kids about these stories not to tuck them in at night and have pleasant dreams. You told them this so they wouldn't wander off into the forest to get eaten, or that they would behave and do what they were told.
Yeah.
So they were more like allegories?
Yeah.
Like, for example, one story that pops into my mind is the story of the Bogman, which eventually, through culture, became the Boogeyman. Like that scary guy, that scary monster that lives in your closet. Originally, it was don't go into the bog, kids, because you could die. And being a bog, it would be very easy to die, to drown, to slip, and nobody would know where you were. And they were cautionary tales similar to that.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the bog, because that book I mentioned, the bog was actually a mythological being that would encompass people in, if I remember correctly, in mist, instead of like sucking them in as part of mud or whatever that it is. It's been a minute since I've looked at that, but it's really interesting because there's two different examples of like a bog myth right there.
Well, and even playing off of that, the bog, when it would create the gas, would create those swamp lights, and people would think those were the fairies, the will-o-wisps that would appear. And that was another reason why they said, don't follow the will-o-wisps because they drag you out into the bog where you'll be sucked down and eaten by the bog man or the boger or the boger man, different titles that it has.
And so your stories in this book, they focus around different creatures in each story?
Yeah. I, to be honest, we're going to find out a lot more when the stories come in from the authors. I know that Dave Farland talked about he is going to be riffing off of the Arthurian legend, and talking about the Lady of the Lake, who is also considered Fey.
Nice.
But these are evil stories, right? So you're saying the Lady of the Lake was evil in this story?
No, I didn't say they're evil. I just say that they're going to be tricky. And the phrase or the word grift it's a confidence game. If you're called a grifter, it's because you are a con man. You are somebody that is in various stages of being a psychopath and using people to accomplish your goals. So some of the stories might be very dark and really incriminate the Fae, and some of them might just play them off as fun little tricksters. But the point of this anthology is to go back to the original stories. I grew up with books in the house that with titles like Irish Tales of Terror and learning about banshees and pukas and things like that well before I knew about any of these cutesy wootsy little fairy things. Also the gnome book. I mean, I think so many people have had that and read about the gnomes and the goblins and all the fun things in there. Luckily, there's people that still believe that garden gnomes are potentially dangerous, despite what the animated movies are trying to do.
I don't know. I really love what author Larry Correa did with the gnomes in his Monster Hunter series, where they're like
the gnomies.
They're just thugs, and they're just they seriously sound like some West Side Gang group, and they're just rough and tough. I love it. But that's the thing that I love about fiction, whether it's short story or long form. You get to take something, say like the gnomes, and twist it to your own needs and make something unique and amazing. And so this anthology sounds like that's what it's doing. You've taken an idea, and now these other authors are going to take it and twist it and make it something amazing and unique. That's something different we've never seen. I mean, especially the Lady in the Lake. That's, she's always been in these Arthurian legends, and if he twisted a little bit and she's more of a mischievous nymph that lives in the water, it's going to put a whole new different twist to the tale of King Arthur.
Well, I mean, you shouldn't be deciding leadership and government based on some lady holding the sword out of the water.
True.
Also true.
Or some boy pulling the sword out of a stone. I mean, that's like saying, hey, I found this cool stick up in the mountains. I'm now the president. It's just not a smart idea. But hey, it makes for an awesome story.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. I'm looking forward to reading it now. I want to hear more about that.
And we are a little over 50% funded with 8 days to go. So I'm a little nervous. I think we can pull it off, but I want it to work out. And I'll announce it here before anywhere else. If this works and we are able to get it funded and produce the first one, we are going to follow the trend of the actual 50 Shades series with 3 books, and we will have Grifty Shades of Fey, the first one, and then we'll have Grifty Shades Darker, and then it won't be Grifty Shades Freed, it will be Grifty Shades Greed. And we will we'll play off of with Darker. We will definitely focus more on the horror aspect of the fairy folk and some of the awful things they do. I'd love to see a Baba Yaga story in there, but also with Grifty Shades Greed. That's when we get to introduce dragons and other treasure hoarding creatures and have stories about them.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
Dragons. This sounds like an awesome, fantastic idea. So those of you listening, jump on the Kickstarter, fund this, because it sounds like it's going to be a great anthology collection. Not only that, you're going to get some really amazing stories from some fantastic authors. If you haven't heard on the show before, look through our catalog. You'll be able to hear those interviews and get kind of a feel of their writing style and who they are. But definitely,
Can I ask,
go ahead.
Can I ask a real quick question, Dan, before what was the inspiration? Because I'm on the Kickstarter right now, of course, because I'm looking at it. And what is the inspiration behind the decoy book?
So the decoy book, pardon me, I just had a 12-year-old puberty moment there, voice cracking. The decoy book, the decoy book is part of the Grifted and Talented reward. And there's a couple different motivations behind that. And one being, you could play your own trick on somebody and be like, hey, I've got this really awesome book, and you give it to them and they open it up and it's completely blank. And you can say, and they'll be like, well, it's a blank book, I can't read it. And you're like, oh, maybe you're not, maybe you're under the spell of the Fae and that's why you can't read it. or somebody could use it as a journal. But we also call it the decoy book because if you follow along the Kickstarter, we are playing it up like the fairies are against us. They're trying to stop us from making this happen. They don't want us to take away the cutesy wootsy persona that's been adopted by the world about fairies that we're trying to uncover. So the decoy book is you get that book and you put it on your bookshelf and then you hide the real book. So the fairies, when they come to take it away from you, they take the decoy book.
Can I get one of those for 10 years ago when my brother was reading my
That's
diary?
the other thing. It's disguised and people can use it as a journal. And yeah, I'm sorry he did that to you. I just caught my 5-year-old doing that, or no, my 9-year-old doing that to my 13-year-old. That was a fun fist fight to break up.
Yeah.
Or was it my sister? I can't, siblings, we always do stuff to each other, but now maybe all my siblings have been Fey in disguise all this time. That would explain everything.
I mean, maybe they're just all changelings and you're the only one that didn't get switched out.
I don't know if that's an insult or not.
I'm not going to go there.
I'm
Don't go
questioning
there either,
everything.
Scott or Dan.
I'm questioning everything at this exact moment. I'm actually wondering if you're a Fey.
I guess you'll never know, or you might find out in September.
All right, so jump on, support this Kickstarter because it's going to be awesome. If you contribute high enough, you get a decoy book that will maybe save your life one day or prevent you from being embarrassed by your brother or sister. You never know. Or maybe your favorite book just won't get stolen by a Fey that wanders through your house. But out of all this, you're going to get a really awesome book with some really awesome stories, and support them because if we do, then we get some more awesome books, as Mike has already suggested. So
It's a book about the paranormal.
yes, and Scott's excited because he loves Ghostbusters. So
I like the paranormal, all right? I love the paranormal. I like fighting against them, and this is an informational, well, I mean, it's fictional, but it's still stories about the paranormal, so I like it. I also like Supernatural, the TV show, and it's not Ghostbusters. I like
Is it fictional, or is it just a collection of guidelines or ways to avoid being tortured by
Or
Fae?
they are cautionary tales.
Now you're getting a little too existential for my liking.
Yeah, it is cautionary. So, all right, folks, with that said, we'll catch you next time, and we're out of here.
Thank you.
Beware the Fae.
Oh, jeez.
Dungeon crawlers.